The game has an all-star voice cast consisting of a bunch of popular voices for the characters, and some play different roles. We have George Newbern reprising Superman from the DC animated universe alongside Kevin Conroy's Batman, Susan Eisenberg's Wonder Woman, Carl Lumbly's Martian Manhunter, Adam Baldwin's Hal Jordan, and Jennifer Hale's Killer Frost. Alan Tudyk, Mark Rolston, Lacey Chabert, and Dave Sobolov reprise Green Arrow, Lex Luthor, Zatanna, and Lobo from Young Justice. Harley Quinn has Tara Strong reprising from the Arkham series alongside Grady Lyle as Catwoman, Kimberly Brooks as Barbara Gordon, and Fred Tatasciore as Solomon Grundy and Bane. Richard Epcar reprises his seriously underrated Joker from MK vs DCU, Kerry Payton returns as Cyborg from Teen Titans, and Patrick Seitz reprises Scorpion from the last 3 MK games. Some others took on new roles, such as Phil Lamar as a surprisingly awesome Aquaman, and Troy Baker adds Dick Grayson to his ever-expanding list of Batman characters he's played. They even have the character voice or lines change based on skins, like Green Lantern's Jon Stewart skin gets Phil Lamar back, Green Arrow's Arrow skin has Stephen Amell doing the voice, Regime and Cyborg Superman get different voice clips, and Damian Wayne has a different voice to Dick Grayson. They did this in MK 2011 as well, where Sector and Cyrax had human and cyborg voices, while using the alternate costume for Sub-Zero, which is the Elder Sub-Zero's costume, would swap out the voice clips for his. And it's a really cool thing. It's not done very often in games, and I wish it was done more often, but when it is done, it's awesome. I can give them credit for that. Now, some of those may be wrong. I mean, lots of people still think Tara Strong is Raven when it's clearly Lani Minella, but the point I was trying to make with all this is that they put a lot of attention into the game's voice cast, and I have to wonder if this was them trying to give the fans their favourite iconic voices for the roles, or if it was just to help cover up how horrifyingly written and out of character the Regime versions are. Hell, George Newbern's evil Superman is basically just Sephiroth.
You'll have to kill me. Good to see you, Cloud.
Kinda have to wonder if he saw it and was just taking the piss. Again, you can't possibly buy that these are the same characters, and it only gets worse in the sequel without the Prime Universe as a point of reference. Consider that Injustice 2 will have Susan Eisenberg, the iconic voice of Wonder Woman from the DCAU, a bunch of animated films, and DC Universe Online, voice an evil version of Wonder Woman who is presented as the only version of Wonder Woman. All of the skins, no matter which iteration they reflect, will retain this mockery of a personality. Imagine if they did an awesome skin of Linda Carter as DLC. Could you imagine her saying this?
Batman sends a child against me?
No. But this?
You wish Amazons to be weak. There's strength in discretion.
Yeah, you could. Same with Superman, same with Green Lantern, same with Hawkgirl. But perhaps more importantly, where do you even go from here? Leaving aside the fact that Regime, Batman, Superman, Flash, Cyborg, and Harley were all seemingly killed in Convergence, which I guarantee won't get mentioned again, this story is done. Evil Superman is defeated, Batman and the repentant heroes can rebuild, that's it. And yet, for whatever reason, there's a sequel coming out. I get why you do a sequel in terms of gameplay. People really liked it and it can be applied easily to another DC universe, preferably one that's a little more accurate. But with the story, what's the point? So far the story seems like it's going to be just the Regime universe with some new threat to face, which, between the writing and recording of this section, was revealed to be Brainiac. It will not have the more traditional, accurate depictions of the characters to balance things out, which was the only reason the first game's story worked at all. The Regime characters are basically the crime syndicate, but if Owlman was a hero. But let's just say for the sake of argument that I'm in the minority on the story, that the vast majority of players love the story and setting, which I assume they do given how long the comics ran for. Even if the fans really want this universe's story to continue, the comics took a scorched earth approach that all but precludes the possibility of a sequel. If you move on with just this universe, unless Resurrection becomes a major plot point through, say, the introduction of the Black Lanterns, you cannot have Green Arrow, Shazam, Huntress, Martian Manhunter, Kyle Rayner, Jon Stewart, Guy Gardner, Lex Luthor, or the fucking Joker in the roster of a DC fighting game because, surprise, they're all dead! Just about every major hero that's not in the first game's roster has been confirmed dead in this universe, meaning that you lose out on not only a good chunk of the first game's roster, but most other potential newcomers as well. You have to wonder if the reason they've been so slow to announce new characters and why almost all of the new ones relate to space is because they're struggling to come up with more characters that are both alive and easy to justify being so. I'll be curious to see how they explain the survival of the Earth-based newcomers up to now. That'll be a fucking laugh. Back when I first wrote this section in December or so, I presented a list of predictions for Injustice 2 based on the unnaturally slow release of information at the time. Between then and the recording of this in March, there's suddenly been this massive surge of information with pretty much a character a week for a while, but even though some of these predictions have been debunked since with newer information, I figure I'll just present these predictions as is and we'll see when the game comes out how much of this I ultimately got right. Supergirl will be arriving on Earth for the first time here, explaining her absence until now. Jaime Reyes will only discover the Scarab now, explaining his absence. Jessica Cruz will be selected as the new Green Lantern of Earth since Kyle, Guy and John are all dead. Hal Jordan will steal a ring or enter a new corps so he can return to Earth and redeem himself for his part in the regime. The Gorilla Grodd and Deadshot cameos in the Riker Island stage will be used to construct their backstories. The Teen Titans, having secretly been trapped in the Phantom Zone since year 1, will return, with Tim Drake becoming playable, possibly taking up the Nightwing mantle. Superboy will likely also be playable so he can get back at Superman for what he did to him. The big threat that will unite the two factions will be either the Black Lantern Corps or Darkseid. We now know this is not the case, but there is a chance for Injustice 3. The former allows them to bring back the numerous dead characters so they can be playable again. The latter would be more likely, however, since it would tie into the Justice League film, which will feature Steppenwolf and properly set up Darkseid's role in that universe. Superman, Wonder Woman and the other loyalists will continue to be ruined by inept writers who don't understand or don't care about who these characters are and what they represent. The story will be a mess and will try not to rely on the comic story for the sake of those who didn't read them, thereby rendering them even more irrelevant, though they will keep characters who died in the comics out of the game unless the Black Lanterns are involved. Alternatively, the game will return the favour and mostly ignore the comic and contradict half of what we saw in it. DLC will include armour sets based on the current line of movies and TV shows, with the appropriate actors providing their voices whenever possible, i.e. just the shows. And finally, the story will end with Superman nobly sacrificing himself to defeat the threat after an out-of-nowhere moral turnaround at the 11th hour. I don't hate Injustice the way I do MK 2011, that's a much more deeply rooted hatred. The game has its good points, some moments are well handled, the cast did a great job with the material, and most important, the fighting is good enough to warrant a continuation to build upon it. But this game's story gets a huge free pass on the DC heroes acting totally contrary to their comic counterparts, while the film versions get lambasted for it. One could argue it's because they're presented as the alternate universe Bizarro Land versions, but as I said, in the comic and the sequel where you only focus on this universe, that is no longer the case. Say what you will about Man of Steel Superman being kind of a callous arsehole murderer, but at the very least, he never subjected his close friends to horrible deaths, nor did he heat beam a 17-year-old boy through the face.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.